Hi guys, my name is Heidi Norwig and I'm going to be presenting to you today about the first peoples of Indonesia. So some new knowledge I want everyone to attain today is Indonesia is home to an estimated 50 to 70 million indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples in Indonesia continue to fight for their land and rights today. Indonesian government does not fully accept the concept of indigenous peoples. Some things I'm going to touch on today is about the history, the tribes, colonization, cultures, and traditional practices. Where in the world? So I just posted a picture here so you guys can see where Indonesia is and where some of the tribes will be. Locations of the tribes. There's the Java, the Mandara, the Sumatra, the Kalimantan, the Sulawesi, Lesser Sunda Islands, the Moluccas, and the Papua. So South and Southeast Asia is home to the largest population of indigenous peoples and communities in the world. They have the highest rate of deforestation and poverty. The Indonesian government promised 12.7 million hectares of community forest land and 9 hectares for land redistribution. They have failed to do so on this, and the indigenous people have yet to see any form of that amount of land be redistributed back to them. Racism is still a thing in Indonesia. The indigenous people in Indonesia continue to be stigmatized and experience oppression. The indigenous peoples are continuing to be underrepresented either economically, socially, politically, and culturally. So one of the biggest land violations is the land and natural resource conflict in regards to the palm plantation concession. So they've cleared out many rainforests to start building palm plantation, and that's affecting our indigenous people over there. There's been lots of acts of violence towards indigenous people in Indonesia. There's customary land grabbing, arrests, violence, and evictions. Two traditional farmers were charged for practicing their indigenous knowledge of the cut and burn system when opening a field. This is a violation to the law criminalizing indigenous people for practicing their knowledge. So in 1900s, the Dutch colonists arrived in Indonesia. They brought missionaries and participated in slave trading. Indigenous people rejected collaborating with Dutch colonists. The youth movement during this time for the struggle of independence. Unfortunately, history has left out how many indigenous people fought for colonialism at this time and died in the wars. The history has mainly just focused on the youth that took part in this independence war. Some interesting facts is the Punan tribe members use king cobra's venom in their blowguns during warfare. The Unwanted People, the War of the Papuan War of Resistance. The West Papuan War of Resistance. In 1962, dispute began over West Papua being an independent state of an Indonesian province. People there were denied the right of self-determination. In West Papua, U.S. transnational company Freeport began construction and operating the giant Freeport copper mine. The military was involved in this startup. There was an exploitation of resources and destruction of indigenous homelands continued all over West Papua at this point. In 1969, the West Papua proclaimed an Indonesian province and renamed the province to Irian Jaya. They continued to have support by the military and the local Indonesian police. In 1973 to 1975, the resistance began, where the Papua New Guinea's independence kind of pushed back with the Indonesian military against the dispossessed West Papuans who joined the Free Papua movement, the OPM. Military began harming villages and looking for OPM members. Um, the people, though, really did band together to show their solidarity. The OPM had a lot of members at this time. In 1984 to 1989, the military began to seize traditionally owned land for transmigration sites, their reincarnation sites. They exploited wealth, the minerals, the forests, and the seas nearby. The genocide had begun in Indonesia at that point. Um, the world did not know about this or what was going on because Australia's media was banned from reporting on factual events. The Indonesian government's way of keeping mass exodus hidden from the world. In 1985, reports of malnutrition, disease, and death by starvation of refugees forced a policy change. The Papua New Guinea's government blamed the OPM members of sacrificing their families and members for political gain. Australia at this point said they would not be helping asylum seekers seek refuge in their country. The Papua New Guinea becomes recipient of the first refugees in the Melanesia Pacific. So that's where all the refugees went. In 1986, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees established a branch office in Papua New Guinea. In the same year, Papua New Guinea became a signatory of the 1951 Convention and the 1967 Protocol, both administered by the United Nations. This was a protection of rights. In 1987 to 1988, refugee camps consisted of being crowded and unhygienic, along with lots of people being in poor health. 3,000 people were then moved to the new refugee camp, the East Away In. In 1989, the giant Bougainville copper mine shut down after armed conflict. In 1990, the East Awen camp, the owners of this camp had threatened to shut it down due to not receiving payment from the government for running this camp on their land. Today, refugees of Indonesia were forced out of their countries by the Indonesian government. Papua New Guinea consumed by economic and political problems. The refugees are unwanted by any third country and know the region that they are in cannot sustain them, hoping one day to return to their homeland and attain the goal of self-determination. So some similarities between the Canadian government and the Indonesian government. So the Canadian government still today is trying to resume rights over Indigenous land, with the pipelines destroying water resources and trying to take traditional territory. The Indigenous peoples in Canada's inherent rights are they're always trying to take these rights away. Just for the Micmac, for example, that's going on over there, how they can't fish. Acts of violence and racism towards Indigenous peoples continue today, especially during peaceful protesting. Tear gas is sprayed, pellet bullets are shot, unlawful arrests and charges. Noting a significant similarity is in the governments and those in power do not appreciate the Indigenous people's way of life and will do whatever they can to take their land, rights, and freedom away. Recognition of Indigenous rights in Indonesia. So the Second Amendment of the 1945 Constitution, enacted in 2000, acknowledged the Indigenous people's traditional existence and traditional way of life. This became the legal basis for the Constitutional Court to rule out customary lands as state forests in 2012. The Constitutional Court affirmed the constitutional rights of Indigenous peoples to their land and territories in May 2013, including their collective rights to customary forests. Government officials argue that the concept of Indigenous people is not applicable. Only 32,000 hectares of customary forests have been handed back to Indigenous peoples. After nearly 7 years since the Constitutional Court decision in 2012, this is an underachievement, especially compared to the public commitment and campaigning at this time. Indigenous people are often manipulated into accepting social forest regimes instead of fighting for the customary forest regulation. In 2019, Indigenous Peoples Bill was drafted in Indonesia. This law has yet to be passed. There were some disputes with this bill regarding the customary land, which the Amin believe that there was lies in this bill. This bill does not recognize the rights of Indigenous peoples and the rights to their customary land. Amin has taken a stand that this bill must be rejected as it was made on false pretense. There was no transparency, and none of the Indigenous people were even included in the make of this bill. October 5th, 2020, the Omnibus Law was passed. This law restricts labor rights and dismantles environmental protections, including threatening Indigenous peoples' access to land and the country's declining rainforests. So I did some research on some of the cultures that I'd like to share with you guys. So the Korawa tribe is an endangered tribe, and they live in tree houses. In 1970, this was the first time they ever discovered that other people lived on Earth pretty much, because they are such a secluded tribe. They're a very religious tribe, and their lifespan is usually cut short due to disease. This tribe does practice cannibalism. An interesting fact is pregnant women give birth alone in the rainforest. The Asmati tribe is quite a well-known tribe. If you ever Google Michael Rockefeller, so this was a son of a governor who lived in the United States, who actually came to the Asmati tribe and washed and swam to the shore. This is a secluded tribe that has never been around people at this point. Michael Rockefeller actually was killed and eaten. The elders have noted that he was eaten, in fact. This tribe refers to themselves as the descendants of God, and they do practice cannibalism, obviously. An interesting fact, the tribe is very artistic, and all of the art can be seen in tribal costumes, art, and the carvings that they do. The Baju tribe is referred to as the people of the sea. They're considered nomads as they are stateless and have no citizenship anywhere. They live a simple life of hunting and fishing. Peoples have physical traits that help them to sustain their way of life. An interesting fact is tribal members purposely damage their children's eardrums at a young age to assist with their aquatic lifestyle. Another water tribe is the Lamalarer tribe. Another hunting tribe that, unlike everywhere else in Indonesia, the Lamalarer tribe received special permission from the government to hunt for cultural reasons and preservation. They use the barter trading system down there. They barter and trade sea creatures for rice and vegetables. So this is similar to trading posts in Canada that were back in the day. An interesting fact about this tribe is the hunters of the water throw themselves off the boat to inflict the wound that kills their sea prey. The Budé tribe is a very isolated tribe. They live a very simple life. They practice their culture and religious practices and do not adhere to the government. Interesting fact is tribal members will become very upset if they see any type of technology enter into their territory. The Abu tribe is considered the happiest tribe in Indonesia. They're very kind and well preserved, who welcomes newcomers. They have preserved their language by sharing oral history and documenting such, but unfortunately today their language is dying. The Mentawai tribe is one of the oldest tribes in Indonesia. The tribe is deeply connected to the forest, and everything is interconnected. The tribe is known for their symbolic tattoos, which represent their connectedness to the land. Interesting fact is women take part in a tooth sharpening ritual. I thought that was pretty cool. So I've added some pictures here so you can kind of see some of the tribes all of the tribes I spoke about. You'll notice the tree houses, killing the animals with their bodies, the teeth sharpening. I really, really enjoyed this project. It was quite fun to research. So some of the success in Indonesia. So the Rights and Resource Initiative supports Indigenous communities. They work to create an enabling environment for land rights recognition and implement and ensure gender equality, equitable land rights. Another thing is Indonesia, it has stated that they want to help the world with their lungs, with oxygen, because they have so many rainforests that are still untouched in Indonesia. The governor of Papua attended a conference of the Climate and Forest Task Force Conference, and he had stated the tropical forests in Papua is ready to contribute in sustaining the world's lungs. According to the governor, around 85% of the forests in Papua are still intact, and around 90% of indigenous Papuans live in or near the forests. He stated, "We are committed to green growth that recognizes the existence of indigenous peoples." So I'm going to touch on the relationship to the land. So Indonesians, indigenous people, are referred to as guardians of forest and nature. The indigenous people who are guarding their areas and not massively exploiting their resources have the spirit of sharing. They have strong resilience. Caring for the forest, respectable to plants and animals, and nourishing relationships with the natural world. If the interconnectedness relationship between indigenous people and the land, spirits, and animals is taken away, they would experience such a loss in the following ways: loss of livelihood, increased risk of conflict, loss of identity and culture, environmental and social harms. For spirituality and rituals, I found this amazing tribe, and I was so it was just so amazing to research them that I had to put them in here. For the Torosian people of Indonesia, death is part of a spiritual journey, rituals of the ancestors. This is based around opposites, life and death, east and west, sunrise and sunset. Families keep the mummified remains of their deceased relatives in their home for years. Eventually, these deceased loved ones get buried in tombs. They're regularly exhumed, though, and cleaned off and cared for. These people change their clothes. It's just amazing. Customary for the Torosian to put gifts and valuables in the coffin. They actually keep this a secret because grave robberies occur, so they never actually tell other family or friends what is being buried in the tombs with their loved ones. The funerals are lavish to pay respect to deceased elders. The funeral is a 3-stage rite. Number 1 is the wrapping of the corpse and the lamentation. Number 2 is the funerary ritual and animal slaughter. Number 3 is the placing of the corpse in a rock tomb. The higher the social status of the deceased, the larger, more drawn-out ceremony occurs. And then I've just added some pictures here for you guys. So these are deceased loved ones, and this is how they care for them. And like I said in there, they will have them be in their homes for many, many years before they actually bury them in their tombs. I hope you guys enjoyed my presentation today. Like I said before, I enjoyed doing this, and I hope you guys took away some new knowledge. Yeah, here's my references. Thanks, guys.